Here's something that shouldn't be possible, and yet it happens to surviving spouses every single year. Their income goes down, sometimes by a third, and at the very same time, their tax bill goes up. Less money coming in, a bigger slice going out, while they're grieving. It has a name in financial planning circles, the widow's penalty, and it's one of the cruelest, least discussed traps in the entire retirement system because almost nobody sees it coming. A couple spends 30 years building a comfortable, well-planned retirement. One spouse dies, and within about a year, the survivor, usually the wife because women tend to outlive their husbands, discovers that the tax code now treats her as a single person, with brackets half as wide and a standard deduction cut nearly in half, even though the bills on the kitchen table haven't gotten any smaller. Here's the part that should make every married couple watching pay close attention. This is almost entirely preventable. But the work has to be done while both spouses are still alive and well. Wait until after, and most of the best moves are gone. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly how the trap springs, the 2026 numbers that make it bite, and the specific steps a couple can take now to protect whichever one of them is left behind. If that's useful to you, stay with me, and if you're not subscribed yet, do that now, because this is what I break down every week. Let's get into it. Start with the thing that makes this so counterintuitive because it genuinely surprises people. When a spouse dies, your gut says taxes should go down. The household lost a person. It lost income. Surely the tax bill shrinks too. And it doesn't. It usually grows. So let's walk through why. It comes down to one administrative change that sounds harmless and is anything but. Your tax filing status. While both spouses are alive, you file as married filing jointly. That status comes with wide tax brackets and a generous standard deduction. The system is built to tax two people's income gently. In the actual year your spouse dies, the IRS still lets you file jointly one last time. That's a small mercy, and it matters, as you'll see. But starting the very next year, unless you have a dependent child at home, you have to file as a single person. And here's what that switch does all at once. It cuts your tax brackets roughly in half, meaning your income hits the higher rates much sooner. It cuts your standard deduction nearly in half, meaning more of your income is taxable in the first place. It lowers the income line where your Social Security starts getting taxed, and it lowers the income line where your Medicare premiums jump. 4 hits simultaneously triggered by a single change of status that you didn't choose and can't avoid. Now layer the income side on top. When one spouse dies, the household keeps the larger of the 2 Social Security checks and loses the smaller one entirely. So that's one check gone. If the deceased spouse had a pension, it may shrink or stop completely, depending on what they elected years ago. In practice, the surviving spouse's income often falls by about a third. But the mortgage, if there is one, doesn't fall. The property taxes don't fall. The insurance, the utilities, the upkeep on the house, none of it gets cheaper because there's one person living there instead of 2. So picture the squeeze. Less income coming in, higher tax rates on what remains, more of that income exposed to tax, and the same fixed bills as before. That is the widow's penalty, and it catches most people completely off guard, because nobody ever sat them down and explained that the survivor years are a financially different country than the married years. Here's the strategy, and I want to state it plainly because it reframes the whole thing. You do not fix the widow's penalty after a spouse dies. You fix it years earlier while you're both alive by deliberately using the wide married brackets while you still have them. That's the core move. Right now, as a couple, you have access to those generous joint brackets and that bigger deduction. Most retirees underuse them. They pull only what they need and let a large traditional retirement balance sit there growing. But that growing balance is a tax bomb aimed squarely at the surviving spouse, because one day it'll be coming out at single rates. The fix is to voluntarily move money through those wide brackets now, most powerfully through Roth conversions, so that less of it gets taxed at the brutal single rates later. By the end of this, you'll know how the conversions work, how to size them, the other tools that protect the survivor, and the exact things to check this week. If this is the kind of practical breakdown you want more of, subscribing to Saul's Retirement Guide means the next one finds you. Now let me show you what this looks like for a real couple, because the numbers only hit home when you see them in a life. Let me introduce you to Robert and Carol. They're both 72, married 46 years. Robert was a high school principal. Carol taught 3rd grade. Between them, they have a comfortable retirement, Social Security for both, a pension from Robert's district, and around $700,000 in a traditional retirement account they've barely touched. They are, by any measure, fine. Careful, modest, fine. Together, filing jointly, their retirement runs smoothly. Their income sits comfortably in the lower brackets. Most of their Social Security escapes tax. Their Medicare premiums are the standard amount. They feel secure, and they have every reason to. Then Robert has a heart attack, and he doesn't survive it. And in the fog of the next several months, the funeral, the paperwork, the unbearable quiet of the house, Carol is not thinking about tax brackets. Why would she be? But the tax code is thinking about her. The following January, she files her first return as a single person, and her accountant gives her a number that doesn't make any sense to her. Her income dropped. Robert's Social Security check is gone, and his pension was reduced. She's living on noticeably less, and her tax bill went up. Here's what happened underneath that number. And it's the same thing that happens to surviving spouses all over the country. Carol lost the smaller Social Security check, so her income fell. But the income that remained, her own Social Security, the pension survivor portion, and the required withdrawals from that $700,000 account, now gets measured against single-person rules, half-width brackets. A standard deduction cut nearly in half, and suddenly a chunk of her income that used to sit safely in low brackets is being taxed at rates she and Robert never paid together. Nobody did anything wrong. The trap was built into the system, waiting the whole time. So let's get specific about how this works with the actual 2026 numbers, because the size of it is what convinces people. There are 4 separate hits, and they stack. The first hit is the tax brackets. As a married couple in 2026, you don't reach the 22% bracket until your taxable income passes about $100,000. As a single filer, you hit that same 22% bracket at just over $50,000. The brackets are roughly half as wide, so the surviving spouse, often with more than half of the household's former income, gets pushed into a higher rate on that income almost immediately. The second hit is the standard deduction. In 2026, a married couple where both are over 65 gets a standard deduction of about $35,500. The moment the survivor files single, that drops to around $18,150. That's roughly $17,000 of income that used to be shielded from tax entirely, now exposed. Same person, same house, nearly half the shield gone. The third hit lands on Social Security. The rules for how much of your benefit gets taxed are based on income thresholds, and here's the quiet cruelty. The thresholds for single filers are lower than for married couples, and they've never been adjusted for inflation since the day they were written decades ago. So as a single filer, more of Carol's Social Security becomes taxable, up to 85% of it than was taxable for the same income when Robert was alive. The fourth hit is Medicare, and this one genuinely shocks people. Medicare charges higher income retirees an extra premium called IRMAA. In 2026, that surcharge kicks in at $109,000 of income for a single filer, but $218,000 for a couple, exactly half. And it's a cliff. Go $1 over a threshold and the full surcharge hits. So a survivor whose income didn't change much at all can suddenly find herself paying a Medicare surcharge that, as a couple, she'd have been nowhere near. The base Part B premium in 2026 is about $203 a month, but a surviving spouse pushed up into the surcharge tiers can pay $400, $500 a month or more, and there's only one of her now to pay it. One real example puts a survivor at around $146,000 of income, paying over $400 a month, when as a couple they paid the base rate. And remember, IRMAA looks back at your income from 2 years earlier, so the surcharge can land right in the middle of the hardest stretch. 4 hits. Higher brackets, smaller deduction, more taxable Social Security, higher Medicare premiums. All triggered by one change of status, all landing on the person least equipped at that moment to deal with them. And for most retirees, that change comes fast. There's one narrow exception. If the survivor has a dependent child at home, they can keep using the joint brackets for up to 2 extra years under a status called qualifying surviving spouse. But the typical retiree's children are long grown, so that exception almost never applies. For Carol, and for most people in their 70s, it's 1 year of joint filing in the year of death and then straight to single. No grace period, no easing in. I want to be honest with you, because for a long time I planned retirements the wrong way, and this trap is exactly where I went wrong. When I sat down with a married couple, I planned for the 2 of them. I optimized their joint taxes, their joint income, their joint retirement. I treated the couple as the unit, start to finish. I was wrong. I was planning as if they would always be 2, when the hard statistical truth is that one of them will almost certainly spend years, sometimes a decade or more, alone. I was optimizing the comfortable married years and quietly ignoring the survivor years, which are often the financially hardest and the emotionally hardest at the same time. I'd build a beautiful plan that worked perfectly right up until the moment it mattered most, and then fell apart on the survivor. The thing I kept underweighting was that retirement isn't one phase. For most couples, it's 2. There are the years you're both here, and there are the years one of you is left. And a plan that only takes care of the first half isn't a finished plan. Once I started planning for both halves, actively protecting the survivor while both spouses were still alive, the whole approach changed. When couples get this wrong, they tend to fall into one of 2 patterns, and neither one serves the survivor. The first group never plans for it at all. They do the natural thing, pull only what they need each year, keep their income low, let the big traditional account grow untouched, and feel responsible for doing so. And on paper, while they're both alive, it looks great. Low taxes, growing balance. But they're quietly loading a gun pointed at the survivor. That untouched account keeps growing, the required withdrawals on it keep getting larger, and the day one spouse dies, all of it starts coming out at single rates, taxed harder than it ever would have been if they'd spread it out. They optimized the easy years and detonated the hard ones. The second group hears about this trap and overcorrects. They panic, and they start converting huge amounts to Roth in a single year, or pulling out far more than makes sense, spiking their own income so high right now that they trigger the very Medicare surcharges and high brackets they were trying to avoid. And they do it while both are still alive and there's no penalty looming yet. They turn a future problem into a present one. Aggressive is not the same as smart. The whole art of this is doing it gradually, filling the wide brackets each year without overflowing them over a stretch of years. What both groups miss is the same thing, that the goal isn't lowest taxes this year, and it isn't lowest taxes someday. It's the lowest total tax across both halves of retirement, the married years and the survivor years together. Plan for the whole arc, and you fund a good life now and protect the survivor later. Plan for only one half, and someone pays for it, usually the one left behind. So let's go back and actually protect Carol. Except we have to do it before Robert dies, because that's the only time most of these tools work. Imagine we're sitting with Robert and Carol years earlier, both healthy, both here. The central move is Roth conversions, done deliberately year after year while they're both alive. Here's the mechanism. Each year, they take a chunk of that $700,000 traditional account and convert it to a Roth. They pay tax on what they convert, but at their wide, gentle married brackets. They convert just enough to fill up their current bracket without spilling into the next one. Maybe that's $20,000 or $30,000 a year. They do it again the next year and the next. Slowly, deliberately, they move money out of the account that would one day hammer the survivor and into a Roth, which comes out completely tax-free and, this is key, has no required withdrawals at all. Look at what that accomplishes for Carol. By the time Robert dies, that traditional balance is much smaller, so the required withdrawals that would have been taxed at her single rates are much smaller too. A big share of their savings now sits in a Roth, which she can draw from tax-free, and which doesn't count against her for Social Security taxation or for those Medicare surcharges. The tax bomb has been quietly diffused, one moderate conversion at a time, using brackets that simply disappear the moment one of them is gone. There are supporting moves that stack on top. While they're married, in any year their income is low, they can realize capital gains in their brokerage account at a 0% federal rate. And that 0% bracket, like everything else, is twice as wide for a couple as for a single person, so it's another thing to use while they have it. They should look hard at life insurance on the first spouse likely to pass, because a tax-free insurance payout can replace the lost Social Security check and the lost pension income, and hand the survivor liquidity exactly when her income drops. They should double-check the pension election Robert made at retirement. A joint and survivor option that keeps paying Carol after he's gone is worth its lower monthly amount precisely for this reason. And in the actual year a spouse dies, remember that the household can still file jointly one last time, which makes that year, as grim as it sounds, often the single best year to do one more large Roth conversion at married rates before the door closes. None of this is exotic, and none of it is a loophole. It's just using the married years on purpose, instead of letting them go to waste and leaving the survivor to pay the difference. There's one more tool worth knowing because it keeps working even after the survivor is alone. Once either spouse is 70 and a half, money can be sent directly from a traditional IRA to a charity through what's called a qualified charitable distribution. That amount counts toward the required withdrawal for the year, but it never shows up as taxable income at all, which means it doesn't push up the brackets, doesn't add to the Social Security that gets taxed, and doesn't count toward those Medicare surcharge thresholds. For a surviving spouse who gives to charity anyway, routing the gift straight from the IRA instead of writing a check from the bank is a quiet way to satisfy the required withdrawal without the tax sting. It's a small lever, but in the single filer years, every lever that keeps income off the return is worth pulling. Now, I have to be honest about the limits here, and this is a topic where the details really matter. I'm not your accountant, and I'm not giving you personal advice. Roth conversions in particular are powerful but unforgiving. Convert too much in a year and you can push yourself into higher brackets or trip those Medicare surcharges yourself, which is exactly the mistake the second group makes. The right amount depends on your specific brackets, your other income, and your timeline, and it's genuinely worth paying a good tax professional or fiduciary advisor to model it for you. This is one of those areas where a few hours of expert help can be worth many thousands of dollars. Two more honest notes. State taxes vary enormously. Some states tax retirement income heavily, some not at all. And some offer breaks to married couples that vanish for a single filer. So your state can make this trap better or worse. And the timing is emotionally hard. The best moves happen while both spouses are healthy and clear-headed, which is exactly when no one wants to sit down and talk about which of them might die first. I understand that completely. But having that conversation once, calmly, years ahead, is one of the kindest financial gifts two people can give each other. So where do you actually start? 3 things you can do this month as a couple at the kitchen table. First, run the survivor scenario. Take your current income and have it modeled as if one of you had already passed and the other were filing as a single person. Most tax software and any decent advisor can do this in a few minutes. Seeing your own tax bill jump on the same income, that's the moment this stops being an abstract warning and becomes a real, motivating number. It's a sobering exercise, and it's the single most useful one on this list. Second, find out exactly what the survivor would actually live on. Write down which Social Security check disappears. It'll be the smaller of your two. Pull out the paperwork on any pension and confirm what happens to it when the pension holder dies. Does it continue, reduce, or stop? People are routinely shocked to learn a pension they counted on ends entirely at death because of an election made decades ago. Know that number now while you can still plan around it. Third, map your Roth conversion room. Look at how much space you have left in your current married tax bracket this year, the gap between your taxable income and the top of your bracket. That gap is room you can use to convert at today's rates. If you have a large traditional balance and years of healthy life ahead, a steady annual conversion plan, sized to your bracket and ideally checked with a professional, is the single most powerful thing you can do to protect whichever of you is left. Let's come back to where we started. The cruelest part of the widow's penalty was never just the money, it's the timing. That the tax bill climbs at the exact moment a person has the least capacity to deal with it, in the middle of the worst year of their life, while the house is too quiet and the bills haven't changed. That's real, and the 2026 numbers make it sharper than ever. the half-width brackets, the deduction cut nearly in half, the lower Social Security thresholds, the Medicare cliff at half the income. None of that is something I'm going to pretend away, but here is the part I want you to hold on to. Almost all of it can be softened, and the work happens in the good years while you're both here. Fill the wide brackets while you have them. Move money to Roth on purpose. Check the pension, consider the insurance, use the year of death window. Do that, and the survivor inherits a plan instead of a trap. You don't protect the person you love by hoping the tax code is kind. It isn't. You protect them by using the married years deliberately while you still have them. That's the whole thing. Saul's retirement guide exists for one reason, not to frighten you about what's coming, but to show you the moves that quietly take care of the people you'd leave behind. Subscribe if you want more of this, and I'll see you in the next one.